Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Visit them on the web at recursivesquirrel.com. Episode 623, No Filter. February 8th, 2021. It's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob North. Thanks for joining us. It's the hot trend among veteran Super Bowl advertisers this year, sitting on the sidelines. While the ad inventory is still sold out, many brands that we typically expect to see are either lying low or pursuing alternative strategies. Is it a smart move? Tonight we'll discuss. Also, understanding Bezos' big step back, contrasting the state of linear and streaming, the outcry over influencers using filters, plus this week's Fair, Fail, Foul. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with the Chief Strategy Officer at Roxa, Mr. Ian Baer is here. Hey, Ian.
Hey, everybody. Bob, I think if this might be the second time I've drawn the Super Bowl show, so always an honor to be with you. Thanks.
Yeah, this is the pre-Super Bowl show. The actual Super Bowl show is next week, where we do the analysis of the analysis show. But you're definitely in the Super Bowl running.
Bob, let me have my moment.
I don't want to confuse the audience. They're showing up here. They expect certain things. I got to tell them the truth.
Fair.
Now, next, she's the Vice President of Social Media at 9 Rooftops. We say hello to Ms. Sloane Kelley. Hi, Sloane.
Hey, Bob. Thanks for having me back.
Oh, my pleasure. And finally, we welcome back the founder and president of Quantent Marketing, Ms. Tamara Prewitt. Tamara, hi, how are you?
Hello, it's good to be back on the BeanCast. I have more data to share this week.
I love it. I love your data. Well, let's move right into the topics. And it being Super Bowl weekend, and no, we are recording this before the Super Bowl, so we have no Super Bowl ad commentary. That comes next week. The big story for this year's pre-Super Bowl ad game is not the ads themselves anyway, but the brands who are sitting out. Some are just staying quiet, some are donating their Super Bowl ad budgets to causes, and some are just pretending to sit things out, and we'll get to more of that in just a second or two. But Ian, we always say in this business that when things are bad, that's when you really need to advertise, and things are really bad right now. But does that rule change when it comes to the Super Bowl? Is it worth sitting out? Is it probably prudent to sit out given the circumstances that we're all facing?
Well, Bob, I'm glad we've decided to dedicate the entire podcast to this topic today. I think that's what it's going to take to even begin to unpack it. But look, it's not just who's spending, who's not spending, how much they're spending. It's what are they spending on? And a lot of brands and a lot of marketers are trying to navigate this balance right now between communicating values, but also doing the right thing for their business, because, by the way, that's also part of saving and creating jobs. The challenge is consumers are looking at the brands that they choose through a different lens, and values count a lot more as a result of what we've all gone through in the past year. And now we're hearing statements like, companies who put profits over people will lose my business forever. So it's a really tricky balancing act, and that's why.
Do you really believe that? Do you really believe that? I mean, that whole idea of, if they put profits before people, they're going to lose my business forever. When Amazon is doing so much more business than they've ever done before, yet they seem to be putting profits before people, and nobody seems to be having a big problem with that.
Well, the question is, with so many behavioral shifts, is it a blip or is it an indicator? And we don't know yet, because you cite a really good example. At the same time, we know that about 75% of consumers have made a brand change of some kind, sparked by something that has occurred through the pandemic. And a lot of those shifts are based not only on things like convenience, or I can't get out of my home, although, we're all feeling that, but it's also based on alignment with personal values. And we are seeing people step away from brands. I mean, I don't want to get into the whole cancel culture thing, but we are seeing people vote with their wallets in alignment with personal values like not before. So the question is, blip or change? I don't know.
Hey, Bob, let me just add to this.
Yeah, please.
I've actually tried to get myself off of certain technology company platforms, and I honestly can't.
Right.
I mean, there's just not anywhere else to go in a lot of cases. So in certain scenarios, I mean, maybe retail has a lot more places to go, but in a lot of situations, because we've become a consumerism of very large companies, the small business is really dying, and we just don't have as many options. So yes, we may want to shop our values, but actually doing it, I'm finding to be very difficult.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I mean, I think in our heart of hearts, we do want companies that care about people, that do take care of their own, that support local businesses, etc. But the reality is, if we need something, we go to what's convenient. I mean, this is the same argument we always have when we come to privacy. I mean, everybody demands privacy. They don't want companies spying on them, yet at the same time, when the services are diminished because you're not spying on them anymore, they get angry about that. So when it comes, but getting back to the topic on hand, as far as the Super Bowl, does it make sense, Tamara, for a brand to just kind of sit out this time? I mean, it's some of the biggest brands like Coke is pulled out of the advertising game on the Super Bowl. I think it's Pepsi is only doing the halftime show, but not running an ad during it. None of their products are running during the Super Bowl. It seems like if big marketers who know better, who know that when times are tough, you should be advertising, you should be doubling down on advertising. If they're pulling out of the Super Bowl, what makes it different than the average marketing effort during a bad time? Is the Super Bowl just considered too extravagant to be effective when it comes to bad times?
I think, well, there's like 5 things going through my mind, but let me start with this one. I'm applauding and actually fascinated by the fact that they're turning the fact that they're not advertising into its own story to gain awareness. Go team. I mean, that was clever. And on the other hand, I remember during, the dot-com bust and times when we've had to be more austere, let's just say, that it was unseemly to spend a lot of money, on private jets or on, big conferences. And I kind of think maybe right now it's a little unseemly to spend that many millions of dollars on one ad. And it might just be unseemly to the employees of the company as well as to the investors of the company, but it could also be to consumers. This kind of level of spend during a time when a lot of people are hurting really badly might just be unseemly.
Do you think it's...
I love that you brought up the employee angle. Sorry, I just wanted to say that because I think that's something a lot of people miss.
Yeah, I think that's a good point as well. My thought, though, and maybe we can get Sloane in on the conversation with this one. My wonder is just like, are they really cutting their ad budget? Is it really about cutting your ad budget to get rid of the Super Bowl? Or is it more about realigning those dollars to more effective targets and more effective types of advertising in order to make a difference in the total marketing effort? Like it's just better to spend your money elsewhere in a downtime than the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a lot of realignment going on out there. and from some big players. I mean, I think that's exactly what Coca-Cola has stated, that, they're realigning and kind of figuring things out. Potentially a lot of, changes coming on their side. But you've got others, like I think Budweiser has actually maybe had kind of a win-win in all of this. They said, look, we're not going to spend the money. We're actually going to donate it to, a really important cause, which is great. And a lot of press has come out of that. And in addition, I mean, you've got it's entered kind of the general public discussion. It's not just marketers that are talking about, Budweiser skipping out. It's people are having these conversations around their dinner tables or on social, or even publications that have started digging back and like rerunning their favorite or their, listicle top 5 Budweiser ads from past Super Bowls. So they've actually, I think really gotten quite a bit out of it.
Let's talk a little bit more let's drill down on the Budweiser story itself. And that'll be a good segue into talking about whose sit-out strategy seems the strongest. But what about Budweiser's big step back that they're not going to be advertising during the Super Bowl? Have you seen the ad that they're running in its place? It's basically a Budweiser ad. There is nothing about that ad that doesn't say, we've decided not to. It basically says we've decided not to advertise in this year's bowl, so we can bring you this great PSA message, which is brought to you by Budweiser. It's still a Budweiser ad. There's nothing about it that's not a Budweiser ad. So I'm wondering, is that a solid strategy, or are people just going to cry BS when they see this thing on Sunday?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I mean, the other piece of it too is, I mean, they're still running ads for businesses within their portfolio. So
that's the other thing. It just gets so confusing.
Exactly
Anheuser-Busch is running an ad. AB InBev is running an ad for all beer. So how is Budweiser not advertising when AB is advertising?
I'm going to show my age here, but do you remember when PBS first relaxed their rules around advertising, and you started to see these little sort of amorphous brand ads at the beginning of a lot of programs? This feels a little like that to me. It's like we're not advertising, with a wink and a nod.
That's exactly what it feels like. Well,
But I think it misses something though too, because I mean, it goes without saying, we've been living in crazy times for the last 11 months. Things are scary out there in a lot of ways right now, but at the same time, I do think that a lot of people are still looking to be entertained by, the game, and a huge part of that for a lot of people has nothing to do with what's going on the field, and it is all about these ads that can kind of take you away to a little bit of another place and, kind of enjoy something for, 30 or 60 seconds.
So this might actually be a good segue. I don't know, you decide, Bob, but let's talk about the content. I mean, it's hard to do the cost of the ads on the Super Bowl is very high. The production value has to be amazing. And it's hard for anyone to go out and do the kind of production on the content side that we expect to see in a Super Bowl ad. So that could be driving some of this shift over to the PSA sort of announcement kind of deal.
You think it might be just about a cost of production? I mean, they're spending $5 million on the ad itself. Production might be $1 million for a half decent ad. I mean,
I don't think it's the cost, Bob. I think it's the logistics, and we saw that they're using stock photography in these Super Bowl ads. There was one. There was my mind.
Yeah, there was one. It was really funny. 2 brands got called out for using the same stock footage in their ad for the Super Bowl. I'm not going to name the names.
And that's what I'm talking about. It's maybe it's the logistics of it, because for anyone to go and pick stock photography, and then on top of that, not to get exclusive rights to that stock photography to run in the Super Bowl, I'm just thinking to myself, oh, somebody's probably fired.
Yeah, it seems that way.
I just think it's not a great time. It feels a little inauthentic right now to give the illusion that there is no pandemic. And I think to an extent, when you try to fill in the gap with too much, stock footage and CGI, you can cross that line.
That's another point. I did an ad review, a pre-game ad review for the American Marketing Association Southern Connecticut chapter back on Thursday of this week. And the one thing that kept coming up, people kept saying, why are people not wearing masks? Like over and over again, there's these scenarios in these ads and no one's wearing a mask. It seems like we've written off 2020 as being a bad year, but 2021 is great, but it's not great. It's still the same year. It's still the same year rolling out. We're still have people dying. It seems like brands could have been better stewards with this. I know we're straying into conversation of critique of the ads here now, but it does seem a little bit disingenuous to have ads out there that are not reflecting society, what's going on. And I can understand why a brand would want to sit out, because that's a minefield in and of itself, isn't it?
That's a difficult minefield. And, just kind of getting into all of this logistics, it is a huge factor. I mean, going through production on the US Open back in August and September and delivering all of the, in the moment content that we had to create, that was a huge thing that we had to think about constantly. Like, for players walking onto the court, they were supposed to have a mask on. Like, is that happening? Can we show video if they didn't do it correctly? Like, all those things are definitely complicating efforts, but it is possible, to get this stuff off the ground. And, we've seen it for sure across all of the different major sports entities delivering, in some really crazy times, this kind of stuff. So, I do think there's an element in there that needs to be captured. And, I know we're not getting into critiquing the ads, but I think that from what I've seen so far, I think some brands maybe did a bit of a better job on that front than others.
Yeah, and they did. I can think of two right off the top of my bat that did a good job with negatives and turned them into positives. I mean, M&M's in particular did a good job with it, but that's beside the point. Hey, whose sit-out strategy seems the strongest to you? Anybody want to take a stab at that one? I mean, a lot of the big brands have sat out and they have some kind of statement about donating their money, like Planners is donating their money to support of vaccine research, not research, but rollout, and Budweiser is supposed to be giving their money over to the ad council so that they can put out vaccine awareness type advertising. I mean, who's doing it best right now, and who's just doing it and being self-serving? What are your thoughts?
Well, look, I think you used the word minefield before.
Yeah.
And this is a minefield. There has never been more of an advertising minefield potentially than this Super Bowl. I mean, think about one aspect. The quarterbacks are politicized.
Yeah.
When has that ever happened? Where literally you've got the left likes one quarterback and the right likes another. I mean, holy cow. There's nowhere you can step in this Super Bowl that's completely safe territory. But the one thing I think is going to be really important to the way consumers vote with their wallets in the end is not just what these companies say they're going to do, because people have felt really burned. Not just over the last year, we are in the 14th month of 2020, but really over the last several years at companies that have said one thing and done another. And the scrutiny on brands and corporations in their follow through to those types of commitments to things like supporting vaccination acceleration, stuff like that. I think that's really, it may sound like a cop-out to say there's no way to know that today, because all we're going to look at for now are the ads themselves. Let's come back to it in 3 or 4 months, and I think we'll be able to tell a lot more in terms of public sentiment and commerce.
It's true, and that's a fair statement. I mean, we need to look back at what the strategies were and see what the results are. I mean, everybody wanted to critique Pepsi for their sitting out of the Super Bowl and offering up money to charities a few years back. Everybody loved the idea at first and then was really critical of it after the results came in. So, I mean, we do need to look back on this and reflect. But is there any obvious brand that shouldn't be advertising that is? I know we have like 10, at least 10, if not more. I haven't done the complete count of the advertisers, but there's at least 10 new advertisers to the Super Bowl. People, brands that have never advertised on the Super Bowl prior to this. Anybody who is advertising who shouldn't advertise, in your opinion? Tamara, any thoughts?
I haven't looked at the full list of who all is advertising. I did like the Planters approach. And I think there's a lot that can be done to do a better job of making sure that the value-based marketing activity that you're espousing is in fact, reflecting values and not just marketing spin. Right. But overall, I really feel that, along with everyone else, this is such a minefield, especially for the biggest brands. Maybe this is a great time for the smaller brands to come in and actually get some traction as the bigger brands leave them some space. So, and I said this earlier on, that small business has been really hammered. Now, I'm not saying small business goes and spends $5 million on an ad, but I am saying that there's a lot more diversity in the advertising, and that we may look back on that and feel like that was a good thing.
That's a good point.
I think that's a great point. And, it's not a brand that I would say should at all be sitting out, but it is one of these newcomers. And just in thinking about, values and things like that, it's maybe not like your immediate takeaway from the ad, but, Uber Eats, it felt like was trying to make that connection to like local business, which, definitely could be a smaller business. And for sure, restaurants have been hurting so much. So I do give them credit, for joining for the first time, albeit, and this is not a critique of the ad, but more of a self-critique of myself. When I watched their ad, I'm like, oh my God, it's got Wayne and Garth in it. I'm like, I am like the quarantine version of myself looks like Garth. I'm like, this is terrifying. I've been, wearing a flannel shirt and like music t-shirts with the hair, blonde hair that hasn't been cut in, I don't know, a year. So I'm like, this is scary.
And HD has not been kind to them. So.
No.
Well, the other huge story that came out this past week that a lot of people are talking about is that Jeff Bezos is stepping back a little bit, ceding the CEO role to the Amazon Web Services CEO, Andy Jassy. I think that's who it is. I have to check my notes, but Andy Jassy. And Bezos himself is taking the chairman role. Tamara, what can we infer from this move? I mean, will things change substantively for Amazon?
When I first heard about it, it does bring the question, how much is he really going to be involved? Is this just, ceremonial step back? But I actually think it's real. And I think he actually wants to devote his time to space. And I think Jeff Bezos will go forward and be in the news a lot. And it'll be for different things, which will be interesting to watch. I especially think that having put someone in from the Amazon cloud side, you're going to have a person who's much more about Amazon being a technology company, which it is, than it being a retail company. And so I wonder if other large retailers will pounce on this opportunity while, they're still in transition. It'll be interesting.
Yeah, I can see that happening. I can see like a Walmart, really trying to establish themselves as being a true competitor online as Amazon continues to dominate in the space. I can see them kind of pouncing on this opportunity. But I don't know. It just seems like that Bezos is not really going anywhere. Am I wrong in assuming that, Sloane? I mean, it looks like he's just going to be the chairman. And yeah, he's going to step back. It's mainly about giving him more time to devote to his side projects like Blue Origin, as was mentioned, or even the Washington Post, which is another one of his pet projects. I can see him wanting time for those things, but if you're still the chairman, he still has the ability to overrule whatever the CEO is doing. And the guy seems like he's already a control freak, so it's not going to really amount to a whole lot of difference in day-to-day operations, is it?
I think in the short term, probably not a ton of big change, but longer term, there definitely could be, some shifts and the guy that he's chosen, I think is someone that, has been with him for such a long time that I don't even know that he would be deviating too much from the way that things have been done. That said, I mean, I know that, he's a brilliant guy and, working in the AWS world has done some things that have been pretty incredible. And I think I'm probably like Tamara thinking about, how will things evolve from a technology perspective, but also frankly from an entertainment perspective. And maybe selfishly as a sports person, I'm wondering how things might really evolve with streaming. I do understand that, Jassy is a big sports fan and that's a space where Amazon's definitely been playing, not just here domestically, but in really big markets around the world. And as some of these, rights begin to come up and just shifts in the sports landscape, and you think about the technology that they have, you think about Twitch and so on, and just new generations that are consuming sports in very different ways. That's something that I'm just really excited to see how that might potentially evolve, and where that might go.
You know what? There's one interesting thing about Amazon. I use Amazon in my class, Ian, at NYU. We use it as an example, the Amazon story as a case study of what their main objectives are and where they're moving as a company. And the one thing that becomes really clear when you analyze them is their core mission is not retail, it's not web services, it's not entertainment. It's basically, we want a piece of every transaction anywhere. I mean, that's essentially the core business objective, their mission, if you will, is that they want a piece of every transaction. That's why they bought Whole Foods. That's why they build AWS. That's why they have the Amazon services that they provide to their third-party sellers. I mean, it's all about getting a piece of every transaction. So is this move indicative of kind of a doubling down on that particular strategy?
Well, so here's where I show my age. I remember being in an executive training classroom at Babson College in 1999, where the thing we were debating was the future of Amazon. Amazon at that time was a bookstore. And we all talked about, are they ever going to be able to do more than that? Are they always going to just be this amazing bookstore? Can you imagine that was a debate? And most of the people in the room who got it said, no, this is going to be a commerce empire. They're going to learn so much about people that ultimately they're going to be able to sell them anything. And of course, that's the reality we live in today. So from your point, and look, we just saw that commerce muscle exercise during the pandemic in a way that's a little bit terrifying, because they were starting to see little chips away at the armor here and there. You referenced Walmart earlier as a company that has made a lot of advances and will continue to and encroach on Amazon space. But then the pandemic hit and no one was more ready with more ways to turn data into dollars than, well, at least in the commerce world, right? Let's leave Facebook out of it, than Amazon. So now you see this handoff, and again, I'll show my age and say the first analog for me was Gates to Ballmer at Microsoft, and you saw the paths of those two individuals greatly diverge in terms of where Gates took his life and where Ballmer took Microsoft. The question for me, there's a lot of interest in what Andy Jassy does. Is he going to be sort of Biden to Bezos's Obama, or is he really going to carve out a different vision? We don't know yet.
And going back to that comment I made earlier about, unwinding yourself from certain technology companies, I personally cannot unwind myself from Amazon at this point. So I feel like they've got themselves so deeply embedded into my life. And I'm sure everyone has a different technology company that they can't unwind from. Maybe for some people it's Apple. But this one for me, I can't unwind from it. So maybe to a certain degree, it doesn't even matter if he changes the strategy because I'm in. I'm hooked. I've got, my Prime Video and I've got my Alexas and I'm in.
And on that point, that kind of leads into the next topic, which is also an Amazon-related story. Two ends of this TV spectrum were in really stark contrast this week. On one side, Amazon ad network topped 55 million monthly viewers. That includes everything from Prime Video to Twitch to all the other content sources that they provide advertising for. While on the other side, shrinking viewership for the TV networks balanced finding adequate make goods difficult, and it raised the specter of liability wipes, where the media shops will be left in the lurch because you basically say, you can't make good on this, so we're just going to wipe this away, and then the agencies end up holding the value. So, Sloane, we've predicted this would happen for over a decade, but is this about streaming versus linear, or is this more about the value of the data involved, in that the richer data that was just being talked about by Tamara is what's really driving the value for advertisers, considering that, we know so much about this 55 million individuals who are currently streaming the content that is available through the Amazon Web Services?
Yeah, I mean, the value of that data is huge, and without it, certainly this shift, that we're seeing at the moment certainly wouldn't have happened. But I think that there have been a couple of other things that have occurred over the course of the last couple of months that have maybe kind of like really sped this up, kind of, put some fuel on the fire in a sense. And one of them is that, it's more about kind of consumer behavior, but you had people that were suddenly at home with nothing to do, no live sports. That's been a huge driving factor in people tuning into a lot of more traditional TV. And, it definitely, there was a big shift in consumer behavior and turning to streaming services, like what Amazon offers. And, that with all of those people, all those eyeballs, it's meant just, a lot of great inventory that's available, and certainly very data-driven opportunity. But I think the other piece of it too is, it's very agile, right? Like, if you're kind of in this more set it and forget it approach to a lot of the TV buying, that's really hard. And in a world where, things have been changing so rapidly, and, the word minefield that's come up, like that's been an issue, throughout 2020 and into this new year. And when you're buying in a more connected world, there's definitely that ability to be so much more agile, and definitely that's attractive to a lot of brands these days. But without the data piece underlying all of that, I certainly don't think that this all would have happened. But those other trends, I think, are important to note. That's I think really what kind of put the fast forward into this space.
So. Look, it really comes down to data and money, right? And those are not two different types of currency in this case. It's actually the monetization of data that is driving so many of these types of decisions and consumer behaviors, right? Because what this really comes down to is, if you want a consumer's money, you have to meet their expectations. And their expectations of almost every experience right now are to be hyper-personalized. I don't want to spend time doing things I'm not interested in, engaging with people in social media that I don't agree with, spending time on entertainment that doesn't meet my needs. So I just see it as one more place where the expectation of personalization is going to drive movement of behavior and dollars triggered by data.
Ian, I have a question. Think about Facebook and data, who has a lot of data, just maybe not quite as much as Amazon, but still quite a bit. And they don't seem
and
to be
different types.
capitalizing. Yeah, they don't seem to be capitalizing, and they seem to be getting more under fire for that. So what's the difference? What makes one right and what the other one not right?
The difference to me, my rule of thumb when I advise brands, and I'm grateful that I get the opportunity to do that, is first be helpful to your customers. And if you're helpful to your customers, things follow. Well, I think a lot of Facebook users feel exploited and victimized right now, as opposed to having been given something that they find as satisfying as what they might get from the way an Amazon or a Netflix uses their data. Netflix probably is as good, if not better, as a loyalty marketer than almost any brand out there. But you don't think of your Netflix experience as loyalty marketing. You just think of it as, wow, they're always putting something interesting in front of me.
I'm going to go back to something that Sloane was mentioning before. She said something about agility, and that's kind of resonated with me a lot. I mean, this idea that when you're on advertising with Amazon in any capacity, you have the ability to be agile and to respond to your marketplace, respond to your audience, respond to the interests of your audience, and kind of align an ad along that line. I mean, that's what the data gives you. Whereas the TV model is still locked up in the upfronts. And that was the big complaint we heard over and over and over again throughout the kind of extended upfront that went on during 2020. The brands were not happy about not having the agility, and they felt like they finally had the networks over a barrel and said, we want that flexibility. Is that really what's driving this more than anything, is just that flexibility to, not commit to advertising up front, but just respond to market needs as needed throughout the course of a year?
I mean, I think it's an important factor. I wouldn't say it's the only one. But having that flexibility, and I think just especially, having gone through all these past crazy months, the value of that is really important. And I think that brands are looking at kind of the mix of their spend in very different ways. And, certainly for those that have been, doing things in a more, maybe not quite in the moment, but trying to be very topical, maybe in the social or digital space, this feels like a natural sort of next evolution of all that.
And Tamara, any thoughts?
Agility, speed, agility, and then cost optimization seem to be the watchwords of the current situation that we're in with the pandemic, because no one knows. No one knows what's going to happen next. And it's been quite the roller coaster. So maybe that won't be as important 2 years from now. But right now, I would say, yeah, it's very important.
And Ian, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I see in the chat that you were saying you had something that you wanted to add to the conversation. Ian, are you still there? You might be on mute.
I apologize.
That's okay.
One more thing I just want to add. There's no conversation that I'm having with major brands right now where first-party data doesn't come up all the time. So part of the appeal of shifting more ad dollars into these data-driven media, where the data exchange is happening on both sides, right, on the send and the receive, is addressability. And being able to have first-party relationships that are data-based with customers who otherwise might be anonymized, or now more and more they won't be able to keep in touch with via cookie.
That's really super interesting. I mean, obviously with the cookie going away and all the different types of restrictions being put on tracking through Apple's changes to their mobile policy, et cetera, there's a lot of question about how to stay in touch with your audience and how to be relevant. And this may be one of the last bastions of being able to do that in any kind of meaningful way. So that's really interesting. Well, I want to move on to one final topic before we go. It started off in the UK with a ruling by the ASA, which is the Advertising Standards Authority in Great Britain. they talked about influencers. And influencers are being targeted right now for use of filters while they're selling beauty products, which seems like a slam dunk. You shouldn't be doing that. But apparently influencers are doing it all over the place. They're using filters and talking about skin creams, etc. What I want to know here, and I'm going to go to Sloane with this one, is this a matter of bad management or of influencer talent on the part of the agencies representing them or the brands working with them, or is this just the price of working with, pseudo-professional, let's just call them amateur advertising medias, if you will? So what do you think? Could this have been avoided by better management, or is this just the price of working with the amateurs out there?
There's definitely, an onus and a responsibility on brands to make sure that what influencers are posting is in line with, any regulations or disclosures that are required. And I think what the ASA has said is that, if you are applying a filter that exaggerates the effect of a product, like that's a no-no. So it's not that you can't use filters, but it can't exaggerate the effect of a product. So that's something that, the brands and the agencies and the influencers themselves all need to be paying close attention to. I think there's still kind of a wild, wild west mentality to a lot of what's going on in the influencer space. And the new team that I'm working with these days, we're doing a lot with influencers, and this is a big part of it, is making sure that everyone's kind of doing what they're supposed to be doing and checking all the right boxes. But unfortunately, I think that there's just a lot that is getting missed, by a lot of the brands out there still.
I should go to my other agency person as well on the panel and ask Ian, what do you think? Is this something that you're facing within your operation? Influencers who aren't paying attention to the standards that they're supposed to be maintaining, and how do you deal with that? How do you make sure that everybody is aware of the requirements that are necessary for advertising without, deceiving the public?
Well, I'll take a step back from just looking at it as an influencer thing, because look, I've been in that side of the game for as long as the game has existed, pretty much. Bob, I was involved in starting up a social media agency in 2009.
I remember that.
So we have seen influencers become an important part of the media portfolio. That will only grow. That remains very active. I think the bigger click, when you go back one step on the lens, is around the role that endorsements play. Because really, what influencers are, it's a modernization of the endorsement and testimonial strategy. And that has always been a gray area, right? It's when you're talking about investments, when you're talking about dermatology products, like there's always some sort of your mileage may vary disclaimer that goes with that. So whether it's a visual filter or it's sort of an attitudinal filter in somebody's words or an experience they describe that might be very atypical, that person who, is on an ad right now, a TV spot for a lawyer who's like, I broke my pinky and Celino and Barnes got me $18 million. And then they put a disclaimer at the bottom saying, yeah, no way that actually happened. I don't think there's a giant difference. There's a lot of sleaze in the world of endorsement, but also a lot of amateur talent that will grow into becoming powerful voices that shouldn't be ignored.
Bob, it seemed like the drop the filter kind of campaign was coming about from the influencers, and that they were showing themselves in the raw, and that was part of the strategy for them. And so maybe the whole thing is all about bringing authenticity back to the influencers themselves, and they're enjoying the authenticity rather than fighting against it.
So what you're saying is that the ASA may have been wrong in their ruling and just saying that these influencers who are being called out were just in the midst of a strategy, or is this other advertisers or other influencers out there kind of bemoaning the fact that the top influencers in the space are doing this particular tactic.
I don't know that it was a conscious strategy, but I do think that upon reflection, or maybe because of the ASA's conversation about it, I don't know which, the cart or the horse came first. But what I see is that the influencers themselves have taken it upon themselves to show their faces as they really are, as part of kind of like the Dove campaign. It's really about this is being authentic. And if influencers are getting farther and farther away from being authentic, they're going to be called out by those who follow them. And that's part of what is great about social media, is that you can start to say, hey, this person is not authentic anymore. And then the tide turns against them. So for me, I think it's maybe they went down that strategy for a bit, and now they're going to go down an authentic strategy, which I think is good.
Sloane, do you agree with that statement? And what, also, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how advertisers or media shops that are dealing with influencers, brands that are dealing with influencers, how would you recommend that they approach this and manage this particular issue going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, the campaign in the UK, the filter drop campaign, I thought that was super interesting. And it seems like it's really kind of what prompted the ASA to kind of take an official stance on this and put this out there, which is really interesting. And I do think there's a movement out there, particularly probably, even among like a younger generation than me, more like the Gen Z world of, showing yourself as you are. Like I've been seeing stuff popping up on some of the different platforms with, bags under your eyes and things like that, I feel like maybe you probably wouldn't have seen in the past. But it is that idea ultimately, like bringing it back around to the influencers, and I think to what agencies and brands are looking for is authenticity. Like if you have ever been out there and have worked on an influencer campaign and you're trying to source different people to work with, that idea of someone who is very real and just has that connection with their audience, I think that's one of the most important things that you're looking for as you're trying to kind of find those folks. And whether they have a big following and they're more of a macro influencer, or they're kind of more in that micro influencer category, that's a huge part of it. But you do have to make sure that you are getting things right. And, even depending on the platform that the influencer is executing on, there's different things that you've got to make sure, again, that you're checking all the right boxes. And, the rules on TikTok are different than on Instagram. And, if you're playing in the category of, like some of these diet type drugs that I feel like is when someone wants to talk about how influencers are this crazy part of the industry, it's often an example that comes up of, a celebrity that's posting about these, detox teas and losing weight and stuff like that. But you have platforms like TikTok that have just said, like, look, we're not allowing that. So that's another really important piece that, if you're working in this space, you've really got to get familiar with all of the different rules and regulations, and also just how they're constantly changing.
Well, with that, it's time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul. But before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do a shameless plug. Starting with Ian Baer. You can find him at roxa.com. I will have the link in the show notes. No need to try to spell it here. But tell us, Ian, what's going on in your world? What would you like to promote?
Well, I never need encouragement to be shameless, Bob. Usually I use this to talk about the work we're doing today, because connections become such an important part of my survival strategy for the last year. I'm going to ask everyone to find me out there. If you want to talk marketing, find me on LinkedIn, super easy to find. Same on Twitter if you want to talk everything other than marketing. Warning, and you may be very unsurprised to hear this, I lean pretty far to the left.
You're a lefty. I get it. Well, yeah, definitely follow Ian. He's always interesting and has a lot to offer. He's just as cool in person as he is on this show. So definitely check him out. Next up,
ridiculously kind of you to say.
Now, next up, Sloane Kelley. You can find her at 9rooftops.com. That's the number 9 with rooftops. Tell us what's going on in your world, Sloane. What would you like to promote?
Yeah, well, certainly I've gone back to the agency world, so feel free to check out some of our work in the space, 9rooftops.com. But in the spirit of connections, I couldn't agree more with Ian. It's been that much more important to connect virtually. So same thing. Certainly feel free to hit me up on the different socials, or if you're looking for a photo of a cute dog, I happen to have one and happy to share that too.
Yes, you do. So definitely check her out. And Sloane's a great person to work with as well. So you definitely want to give 9 Rooftops a shout out if you need social and other types of help with your content. Last but not least, we have Tamara Prewitt. You can find her at quantentmarketing.com. That's the consultancy where she is the principal, founder, president, and chief mucky muck. So tell us what's going on in your world, Tamara. What would you like to promote?
Yeah, and email me at Tamara at that domain, Content Marketing, and let's connect for sure. I did want to just give a little bit of a shout out to some work that I've been doing with a company that you may have heard of called Domo. They are a BI platform, and they help bring data together and make it just possible to really look at the insights from that data. So anyways, we did a study together where we took some government data on government regulations, and then we cross-tabbed that with mobile GPS data coming from a public source of information called SafeGraph. And we released what's called the Lockdown Economics Report. So go into your search engine and search for Domo Lockdown Economics Report, and you will see some amazing data that we've been able to pull together that helps to identify what impact government regulations had on retail foot traffic for all of 2020. And I just want to, I'll drop some of the info real quick. The small business numbers, just like I said, so sad. On April 27th, which was the largest foot drop day for small business, it dropped 83.2%. But even during the holidays, the small business Saturdays and all of that, it was still 50% down. So go out and support your small businesses today, tomorrow, next year. They really need your help. And go check out the report. That's an example of the kind of work that I do.
And clearly, as she has just proven, Tamara is one of the smartest people I know. So you definitely want to get in touch with her and work with her for just that factor alone.
You are full of flattery today, Bob. Thank you.
Well, I mean, there's a reason why you guys get to be on the show.
On that one.
As for me, for more information about me or the show, or to just talk to a lesser person than the people on this panel, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me. And of course, you can find out how to advertise on this program. So check it all out at thebeancast.com. And now it's time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul, a rundown of the best and worst of advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. First up, the fair, and this is top of mind because of that ad preview that I did with the AMA on Thursday, Sloane, but the Amazon Alexa Super Bowl ad is just amazing to me. I mean, it's so good on so many levels. It's funny, it's sexy, it's features people of different ethnic backgrounds other than white people, It's just like everything about this ad is firing really, really well. And it does it in such a sweet, awesome manner that, it should be acceptable to everybody. What do you think?
I love it. I think this is like fair plus. I know it's in your fair bucket, but I give it a little extra point because I don't know if I'm the target audience for the ad, but I've gotten such a kick out of it. It really does have everything. If you haven't seen it yet, you need to check it out. It, in some ways, was like initially reminding me of the movie Her, where the guy falls in love with the AI, but it's just way funnier and, definitely like props to Amazon on this one.
Absolutely. Really, really great. Now, on the fail side of things, there's an Indonesian company called Shopee, which is a e-commerce platform, Tamara, and they went and did an ad campaign that basically featured people, these mock sexual harassment situations that turned out to be not sexual harassment situations. They were, just people saying you should be on Shopee. And I'm going, who in this age and era would ever put out an advertising campaign that is so flagrant in promoting sexual harassment when it's such a difficult problem for a lot of people facing online? What are your thoughts?
I know, like face palm. Could it be cultural? I don't know. Maybe not, but in the past, we could have seen something like that as a parody on Saturday Night Live, right?
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, it actually could have been funny, and it could have been tongue in cheek, but we're just not in the mood for that right now. I don't think even Saturday Night Live has, the same level of parody that they used to have, because the culture has just changed, and that's just not how we roll anymore.
As we've said many times in this program and has been said many times elsewhere, it's just like it is a tough time to be a comedian. So let's go to the foul for this week. I can tell by the lack of laughter that it is a tough time to be a comedian.
No, Bob, mute buttons. Come on, dude.
Now the foul for this week. Parler, which you should know as the conservative platform that was famous or infamous for not having any moderation, their CEO was in the midst of trying to establish more moderation, some decent moderation tactics going forward to try to get the platform back live with Amazon and whoever else was going to host it and get back on the app stores, etc. Well, Ian, he was fired by the board for just trying to moderate the content. I mean, the board actually would prefer for the business to go down the tubes than to see it moderated. This is just the ugliest situation I've seen in a long time when it comes between a board and their CEO. What do you think about this situation?
Well, first off, how do you know Bob and I have been friends for a really long time? He waits until I reveal that I'm a bleeding heart liberal.
Exactly.
To ask me about Parler. That aside, look, the toothpaste is out of the tube on all things Parler, where all those folks are concerned. To me, the most fascinating story I found about Parler this week was, did you see the picture that he supposedly posted of his apartment out on Parler before everything went south? What the hell's going on in that place? And if you haven't seen it, go find it. It looks like some weird, villain's lair from some, Marvel fan fiction series. That's the story that needs to be told.
I'll have to go search for that picture. Well, have a suggestion for this list or just want to discuss it? Comment online. Use the hashtag #FairFailFoul. That's #FairFailFoul. And that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an Apple Podcasts listener, we've also provided a direct link to our listing there, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory on the Apple Podcasts app. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C. Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us then.
You know what I mean? It's like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. It's just like, okay, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like, I don't know, like if it's, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of, it just seems like it's just like almost exactly.
beans.